The harsh winter wind of 1883 swept across the vast snow-covered plains of the Wild West. It rattled the thin wooden frames of the tiny frontier town of Clearwater. Inside the town general store, the air was thick with the scent of dried herbs, leather, and smoked meats, but it offered little warmth to 10-year-old Nellie Thornton. She stood shivering near the back of the mercantile, her small hands tucked tightly into her sleeves. She was wearing an oversized gray wool dress that had seen far better days. The fabric was worn thin at the elbows. The collar was held together by an old mismatched iron button. The lower hem had been let down so many times that a dark, uneven band marked where the cloth had faded. Beside her stood her mother, Cora Thornton. Cora was a proud widow whose hands were rough and red from washing heavy laundry in icy well water. Ever since her husband passed away 2 years ago, Cora had been carrying an unbearable weight. She was struggling with a heavily mortgaged farm and endless hardships. Yet despite their deep poverty, the family held onto a strong legacy. Nellie's grandfather had been a decorated officer who once led a courageous charge during the war. But old memories and brave names could not buy flour, nor could they fix a child's worn-out clothes. Cora quietly placed a few small copper coins onto the wooden counter. She asked the storekeeper for half a bag of oats and a small tin of lard. While the storekeeper swept the coins into his register, Nellie's bright eyes wandered toward a shelf near the window. Resting there was a fresh, heavy bolt of brilliant red flannel. To the freezing young girl, the vibrant cloth looked like a warm flame on a cold night. She stretched out her small hand, letting her fingers hover just an inch above the soft wool. She was careful not to touch it. Her mother had taught her never to handle goods they could not afford. Suddenly, the heavy shop door burst open, letting in a bitter gust of icy wind. 2 prominent women wrapped in thick fur coats stepped inside. They were Harriet Gable, the bank manager's wealthy wife, and her close friend Eunice Croft. As they brushed past the displays toward the fabric counter, Harriet caught sight of the little girl. Her arrogant eyes swept down from Nellie's neatly braided hair to her frayed collar. She stopped at the ragged hem of the faded gray dress. A cold, mocking smirk spread across Harriet's face. She casually mentioned how exquisite the imported red wool was. Then she added that it was certainly no fabric meant for a poor farm girl. She scoffed that any piece of cloth would be a massive improvement over Nellie's current attire. The 2 women broke into sharp, unkind laughter that echoed off the high tin ceiling. Eunice whispered loudly enough for everyone in the room to hear. She said the child looked as though she were wearing a potato sack left out in the rain. She questioned how the granddaughter of an old war hero could walk around with so little dignity. Nellie felt her face burn with deep shame. She lowered her head and stared blankly at the cold floorboards. She wished the earth would simply swallow her whole. Cora stiffened at the counter. Her knuckles turned bone white as she gripped her tiny bag of oats. She closed her eyes for a split second, forcefully swallowing the fiery words rising in her throat. She knew she could never afford to anger the wives of the powerful merchants who bought her daily milk and eggs. Calling her daughter in a firm yet trembling voice, Cora took Nellie by the hand. She guided her out into the freezing storm. Neither of them noticed a tall, broad-shouldered man standing silently in the shadows near the warm iron stove. Josiah Langdon had heard every single word spoken in that store. He was a legendary cattle baron who owned the sprawling, Broken Ridge Ranch miles outside of town. He employed over 40 cowboys and shipped livestock across the country. He held a massive fortune that made him a true millionaire. Yet he never dressed like a rich man. He preferred a faded canvas coat, heavy leather chaps, and a wide-brimmed trail hat. Josiah was a widower raising a 9-year-old daughter named Eliza. As he watched the humble widow and her child disappear into the swirling snow, a fierce resolve settled deep within his heart. He walked toward the fabric counter. His heavy riding boots struck the floorboards with loud, slow thuds that instantly silenced the 2 gossiping women. He called out to the storekeeper, pointing a gloved finger at the red wool. He asked how many yards were left on that roll. When the shopkeeper replied that nearly 40 yards remained, Josiah calmly declared that he would take the entire roll. Harriet blinked in pure shock. She protested that she was just about to purchase 5 yards of that exact wool for her niece's winter coat. Josiah turned his cold, steady gaze directly into her eyes. He replied without a trace of warmth that she might have intended to buy it, but she was far too busy laughing at a child to actually open her purse. Harriet's face flushed a deep crimson. Josiah pulled a thick stack of green banknotes from his coat and dropped the full payment onto the counter. He ordered the storekeeper to load the heavy roll into his wagon. Then he walked out into the freezing air without giving the humiliated women another glance. Josiah did not head straight back to his ranch. Instead, he steered his horse toward the red brick bank at the end of Main Street. Inside, the grand office was warm, smelling of polished mahogany wood and expensive tobacco. Behind the executive desk sat Arthur Gable, the bank manager and Harriet's husband. Ignoring the banker's polite greeting, Josiah stated firmly that he was not there to discuss his ranch accounts. He demanded instead to see the financial ledger for the Thornton family farm. Reluctantly, Gable pulled out a heavy leather book and slid it across the desk. Josiah scanned the column of numbers. He discovered that a modest $200 loan taken out by Cora's late husband had skyrocketed to nearly $450. It was bloated by absurd late fees and cruel penalties, added for minor payment shortfalls. In that very moment, Josiah understood the evil trap being laid. The Thornton homestead sat on a vital stretch of the valley, near a flowing freshwater creek. That creek was the exact path chosen for the upcoming railroad expansion. Gable was not trying to collect a debt. He was intentionally pushing a desperate widow toward total bankruptcy. He wanted to seize her water-rich land and resell it to the railroad company for a massive personal fortune. Without saying a word, Josiah reached into his jacket. He pulled out his roll of cash and slammed $450 onto the open ledger. He demanded an immediate official receipt showing the debt cleared in full. Gable's hands shook uncontrollably as he stamped the paper. Josiah leaned across the wide mahogany desk. He warned the banker in a low, dangerous tone. He said if he ever caught him applying fake penalties to a working family's account again, he would pull every single dollar of his vast ranch accounts out of the vault, and he would convince every cattleman in the county to do the exact same thing. An hour later, Josiah's heavy wagon rolled into the snow-covered driveway of the Thornton farm. Cora stepped onto her sagging porch, pulling a thin shawl tight across her shivering shoulders. Her posture was defensive, as she saw the powerful rancher climb down alongside his young daughter Eliza. She warned him immediately that if he had come to offer charity, he could turn his horses right around. She stated firmly that her family managed their own lives. Josiah replied smoothly that he never gave charity, but only made smart business investments. He explained that he had purchased 40 yards of red flannel to keep it out of Harriet Gable's hands, but his rough cowboys refused to wear bright red, and his daughter claimed the color clashed with her riding boots. He stated that he desperately needed a skilled seamstress to turn the heavy cloth into warm winter shirts for his ranch, hands at generous wages. He asked her to use the first few yards to make a beautiful new dress for Nellie as an advance on her work. He added softly that a town that laughs at a small child is a town that urgently needs to be taught a lesson in proper manners. Before driving away, Josiah handed Cora the official stamped bank receipt. He exposed Gable's secret plot to steal her land and warned her to stay, alert against desperate illegal moves. That night, while Nellie slept peacefully, Cora worked tirelessly by the warm glow of an oil lamp. Her shears cut through the thick wool with immense pride. She stitched the bright red flannel with fierce love, adding soft velvet linings to the wrist cuffs. By 3 in the morning, the dress was finished. It stood as a masterpiece fit for a hero's grandchild. Later, before dawn, when the farm dog barked wildly down by the creek, Cora marched into the freezing darkness. She was armed with her late husband's rifle. She confronted 2 hired thugs who were trying to smash the ancient stone boundary marker to alter the land deed. She fired a precise warning shot through the tree branches right above their heads. Just seconds later, Josiah and his heavy ranch hands arrived on horseback. They captured the trespassers and secured the farm once and for all. The following morning, Main Street was alive with activity as townspeople gathered outside the mercantile. Mrs. Gable and her friends stood gossiping in the sun. Arthur Gable sat nervously inside his bank, waiting for news about the destroyed property marker. Instead, a heavy farm wagon rolled down the street, flanked by 6 stern cowboys riding on horseback. The wagon stopped directly in front of the bank. Josiah stepped down to gently lift little Nellie onto the wooden boardwalk. A collective gasp echoed through the crowd as everyone turned to look at the young girl. Nellie was no longer wearing the gray frayed potato sack. She stood tall and proud in a breathtaking, perfectly fitted dress of brilliant red flannel. Its dark velvet cuffs caught the bright morning light. She held her head high, her calm expression reflecting the true strength and nobility of her ancestors. Harriet Gable dropped her leather handbag in absolute shock, recognizing the rich red fabric instantly. Josiah, Cora, and Nellie walked into the bank, followed by a curious crowd of citizens. Confronted with the signed confessions of his hired thugs, Arthur Gable froze. Then Josiah made a sudden announcement that he was actually the primary shareholder funding the incoming railroad project. Hearing this, Arthur Gable collapsed into his chair, completely defeated. Josiah announced to the entire room that Mrs. Thornton had just signed a long-term contract with the railway company. They would pay her $600 a year to supply water from her creek for the locomotives. Facing total disgrace, Gable was given a firm ultimatum to pack his belongings and leave the county by sunset. As Cora and Josiah turned to leave the bank, Nellie paused near the front door. Harriet Gable stood there, frozen in deep humiliation. Nellie did not laugh, nor did she say a single spiteful word. She simply offered a polite, dignified nod. She smoothed the skirts of her vibrant red dress and stepped out into the warm, winter sunlight. She walked forward as a living proof that true human dignity can never be stolen by small minds.